Hello and welcome to Empire Watch Weekly Live, where we break down the weekly news around the world through an anti-imperialist lens. Every week on Friday, 12 p.m. UTC, we will be challenging the mainstream media narrative and examine what's really going on behind the headlines and propaganda. I'm Ileana Chan, and my co-host is Sara Vivacqua. Hey, Sara, how are you today? Oh no, Sarah, you've frozen already. Okay, this is not the best start to a live. We just lost Sarah. She will be back soon, I'm sure. The internet connection, as she is traveling, is a little bit spotty. But today we will be going over some headlines. First of all, we'll be going over, and I'm going to just put this up, the graphic for us. We'll be going over Ukraine, US, Euro, Russia, FARCE. Brazil's former president, Jair Bolsonaro, begins a 27-year prison sentence. And what everyone should be talking about, the C-Trump meeting. Well, it's a call. It's actually a historic first call where they talk briefly about different things, including updates with Japan. So that's what we will be doing. But hopefully Sarah will be following us. Here, she's here. Oh, good.
I am here. Sorry about that.
I said, hopefully Sarah will be coming back. And you did. Thank you, Sarah. Yes, and we have some commenters saying hello as well. So please ask any questions in the comments, feel free. But how are you doing today, Sarah? You are traveling.
Yeah, I'm doing a bit of traveling. That may be a bit of a problem, a technical problem here. I'm in terrain here in Germany, so probably the internet is not as good as it should be. So I apologize for that. If you're watching us here for the first time, don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and share with other people so we can together read behind the headlines, behind the propaganda. I'm very well. And what about you? What's going on? I'm extremely well. Bolsonaro has been arrested, and we're going to talk about this today.
Yeah. Thank you for that reminder. Please, also people, if you would join us on Patreon as well, because we just want to make sure that we diversify our platforms just in case anything happens to our YouTube channel. So please go ahead and join. You can join for free. We upload these videos, and we also upload audios, and we have a podcast called Global Majority for Peace that we will also be that we will also be. Oh, Sarah, are you?
Yeah, I'm just here for the meantime.
Okay. All right, cool. Thank you. Sorry, we're having some behind the scenes technicals. Didn't mean to break the fourth wall there, but yeah. So basically, join on Patreon and ask us any questions in the comments. And today, I'm so excited to say that apart from the headlines that I just announced, Asa Winstanley, investigative journalist and associate editor for the Electronic Intifada, will be joining us later in the show. We'll be covering different things like the PAL action, UK stitch up in quotation marks, but actually I think it is a stitch up, and also different things about, for example, an update on Your Party, which is Corbyn and Sultana's new political party, through the lens of Asa's book, Weaponizing Anti-Semitism. So he's going to talk us through how that's relevant to what's happening currently in Your Party. And then also we're going to talk a little bit more about just the Gaza peace plan and the realities behind that in many different ways, including Trump and Blair's involvement in that. So we have a pretty exciting show, I think. How are you feeling about it? Can we make it less than 3 hours? That's the question.
We're going to make 2 hours max today because we have other stuff to do, and we don't want to bother too much. We're going to be very objective. Let's hope so. Yeah. So I think we should be starting with a huge news. Is it huge? Is it not? We have, Ileana, Trump's 28 points plan and the Europe 28 points plan for Ukraine. It's very interesting how the US and the UN present themselves as mediator. Juliana, mediator, I understand, is someone who has a level of impartiality that will not profit from a plan. That's my understanding of a mediation. When I think of a mediator, even international level, political level, I imagine an institution that will not take sides, that will preserve the principles of sovereignty, of self-determination, of reciprocity, the international principles that have been established. And it's astonishing that Trump provides a 28 point that helps the US immensely. Have you seen this? Have you seen a mediator, a judge that hands out a judgment and say, well, yeah, you get the car, you get the apartment, and I get everything in between? What kind of mediator? And the same with Europe. Both plan reveal something to me absolutely astonishing that overturns centuries of building an international order. They are both marginalizing the international order with those ad hoc agreements where the US has to profit or the UN has to profit. Ukraine remains, I would call it a colonial partition of the Ukraine, of a country that has been through war for the past 4 years. And it's amazing that
it's not just a war, right? It is, as you're rightly saying, it is the US empire proxy war. So the UK being part of the US empire again. But so it is particularly funny, like you're saying, this is Trump's third peace plan of this year, I believe. I mean, as far as I'm aware of, there was of course, we covered it last week, the UN Gaza peace plan. Again, like you said, the US is a direct participant in the genocide in Gaza, and yet they're the ones that are proposing a peace plan. And then prior to that, there was also the quote unquote peace plan in the DRC, the Congo, where again, Trump pretended like it was a peace plan when actually they were in control of, or they had a US-backed faction that they were just basically saying that they were going to make peace, with. So again, this comes down again, like you're again rightly saying, that there's certain things in this peace plan that do show, I would say, a willingness perhaps to have peace, though, from US to Russia. Of course, Ukraine is being used here as a cover, but essentially we remember back to Trump's presidential campaign run, J.D. Vance and several other figures in Trump's admin now have said quite clearly, we need to divert the funds that we are using for Ukraine to China, because China is the real enemy. So they've already said that quite a few times. And also remember, Trump openly said, I will be able to get peace in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia, in like 24 hours or something like that. Remember, he said that quite famously. So now he's apparently is showing what 24 hours is like in Trump land. And this 28-point Ukraine peace plan does show certain concessions to Russia. So we would just say, like, two things that kind of are standing out here is that the territories, point 21 on this plan, Russia, the U.S. is saying Crimea, Luhansk, oh my gosh, I cannot read this, sorry, Luhansk will be recognized as de facto Russian. So this means that Russia has sort of occupied and has control over these areas, and that would mean a strategic loss for Ukraine. So that does suggest,
and for the European Union, the territorial it's a huge question for the UN, for the European Union, because European Union wants, by all means, in every single official statement, to maintain a strong commitment to the Ukraine, they call territorial integrity. So I think Trump is here, it's creating a huge problem for the EU and the EU militarization. I mean, if you walk around here in Germany, every single building has "We stand with Ukraine." We who? Ursula von der Leyen? You know, who are these people profiting from the NATO expansion? It's very clear. You had this absolute idiot called Annalena Baerbock, who, without a mandate, declared in the parliament that we are at war with Russia. No, honey. I mean, you made a mistake in saying this. It's really right what you're saying, but you shouldn't be saying this in the parliament. You should keep it in your subconscious.
Yeah, you're supposed to say it quietly. That's the quiet part out loud here, for sure. And I think you're pointing to a really important thing here, which is that a lot of people sort of misunderstand when different factions of U.S. empire, as we say, EU, Europe is part of U.S. empire. But when different factions are self-interested, they also lobby for certain positions that might seem to go against the US or go against the overall imperial agenda. But when you think about it as in this supposed war, this proxy war with Russia and Ukraine really started because of the provocation via NATO to provoke Russia and also essentially weaken Russia. The US had campaigners. We can think of these different countries and different people who are holding positions like Mark Rutte, who is the head of NATO, the chief of NATO, right? He has been campaigning for funds for NATO via this fear-mongering around Russia. So Mark Rutte very famously came to the UK earlier this year and said to us, you guys can keep your NHS, but you will have to learn Russian if you do not raise your military budget to 5%. So he's basically using this idea of Russia as an imperialist force in the whole of Europe to scare everyone to raise the military budget. And so different people in the EU, different positions in the empire, they have vested interest in continuing a specific cause. We've seen that with Israel. We're seeing that now with Ukraine. And so this is what looks like the EU standing up to the US, but it's farcical. They're not really doing that. It's more like little quibbles in empire as they sort of struggle for self-interest.
Do you think so? I think the EU has its own interests. Russia and the East Europe is fundamentally important for the German economy. That's where they expand all their industry, their enterprises. They have a historical, a long history with Germany, and I think the Russophobia is also a huge drive. I think the Russophobia in Europe is a bit different from in the US. The US is extremely propagandized, and the Russian gate from the Democrats did them no favor, because now Trump is profiting from the fakery that the Russia gate was. So in a sense, a lot of people may in America say, well, Trump is right because the Russiagate was such a setup from the Democrats that weakens any other of their probably credible or legitimate positions. I think it favored Trump, the Russiagate that was fabricated and propagandized by the Democrats. And Europe is extremely racist, and racism is a huge drive in wars, I think so. And with
sure, but I would say one thing, Russiagate still to this day, people in the US do believe, a lot of people in the US do believe that. So I think in some ways it doesn't help Trump, do you know what I mean? Because some people still accuse him of being a Russian asset. So in terms of how he also reacted to those accusations was to be more hawkish on Russia. And so it undermines this type of peace diplomacy that he's supposedly attempting now.
I think Trump doesn't want any peace. I think Trump wants, for sure, make America great again. And that means make Europe small in a way. I am the one who will have control over Gaza. I am the one who will have control over Ukraine, in particular the rare earth that I did not fail to mention in this agreement. And
I think that's something really important here in this agreement, is that there are specific things, again, that we can see are very much part of the US's imperial agenda, which is capital, more capital, expanding of capital. And so you see in point 12 of the US plan, I think, was it point 12? Point 13 in the US plan, where basically saying Russia will be reintegrated into the global economy. Now, what does that look like? Remember that the US has what they're calling competition, strategic or economic competition with China, which China doesn't really view it that way, but the US is viewing it that way. So they're trying, now that they realize that China is not going to be cowed by their ridiculous tariff, quote unquote, tariff war, they realize that those strategies are not going to work with China. So they're doing a lot of these things where every single trade deal that we've seen Trump do this year basically will require a little bit of this stuff, like AI, artificial intelligence, infrastructure, also natural resources, energy, data centers, which again is to do with AI, and most importantly, like you mentioned, the rare earth metal extraction. So this is specifically in that point 13. And then also the other economic benefit, as you're saying is right, is, of course, there's another one here, I can't remember, which is just basically the privatization and opening of Ukraine further. But remember that in September of 2022, Zelensky remotely rang the bell at the New York Stock Exchange to attract foreign investors into Ukraine. So that's already sort of ongoing. But this is, again, US stating that again, opening the markets of Ukraine, infrastructure contracts, basically imperialist economic control and coercion into Ukraine.
It's absolutely. There is one point here that I thought I was reading wrong. It says that the US will receive 50% of the profits from this venture. They call the peace agreement within the peace agreement as a venture. How telling is this, Ileana? If we really look, the terminology they are using, the peace agreement, they are calling it a venture. They are saying it all through this word, a venture that invested US-led efforts to rebuild Ukraine. So it's crystal clear that giving the words, what they have, it means for Donald Trump, this is a venture where he receives 50% of the profits. Yeah, and Europe will add 100 billion to increase the amount of investment available for Ukraine reconstruction. So actually what we're having here is out there in the open colonial partition, where the US sees the possibility to invest, make profits in a venture with Russia or with whoever they will find, whatever corporation will find here. Okay, Russia, I'll give you the territories, but you'll give me the ability in Ukraine. And it's very interesting because they say a joint Russian working group. And I think what is really striking is that Ukraine will adopt EU. No, he was saying like they will not join NATO, but this is something that you can't really promise.
Just to clarify something before we go into the NATO thing, just to clarify the thing that you were talking about, which is here that the US will receive 50% of the profits. This is an interesting distinction, but we have to mention that is actually the frozen funds of Russian assets. Because remember when this military operation started, in 2021, right? Russians who owned property or their funds were frozen overseas. And so they're saying that they will release the frozen funds, but it will be the US will receive 50% of the profits of this venture. And EU does not want to return any of the funds to the people that previously owned it.
What a surprise. They give funds to Venezuela. EU has a habit of using sanctions to enrich itself. And it's very interesting. Another point in this venture, let's call it venture. That's how they call it, venture. He says, yes. Number 11, Ukraine is eligible for EU membership and will receive short-term preferential access to the European market. How is Trump going to guarantee over that? How is Trump will make sure that Ukraine is eligible for EU membership? This is something that only EU countries can really, you know, he's just copy and paste pieces of the agreement of the EU that are accessible to him.
He's just a mask-off president, though. He's a mask-off, overt imperialist president, where it's like he will just say the quiet part out loud. You know, he's like, "I own the EU." Well, you know,
I tell you what to do. Yeah, that's what he said. I tell you what to do. Shut up, EU. Shut up, Ursula von der Leyen. Okay, I will agree with Trump with that. Shut her up. But it's unbelievable how you can have somebody say it's a mediator of an agreement, of a peace agreement, who calls this peace agreement a venture, and have a huge chunk of profit out of this venture. I'll give Russia concessions of the things that they already have. Maybe I'll recognize what Russia already has in de facto, and there we go.
I mean, like you said, they could just take it. So I guess this is a huge concession, but which is what EU is saying. EU is actually saying we will release those funds, but we'll give it all to Ukraine, which obviously when you give it all to Ukraine for these reconstruction infrastructure contracts, who are going to be the other recipients of the contracts? You know, it's going to be the EU or the US. So it's again... It's, you know, couched. Yeah. So it's, again, kind of a ridiculous thing. But back to your NATO point, which is a really important point here. And I think this is the key issue, again, that started the whole thing in the first place, the provocations by NATO, the continual inching east, right? Like, even though they were told that NATO's initial thing was to contain the USSR, and with the fall of that and everything, like, I mean, to contain Russia, but since then they were supposed to promise to not inch forward, to not keep expanding, but of course they've been expanding. They expanded like 12 times since promising they wouldn't, something like that. So they've included so many different countries, and that's really where we can sort of pinpoint the beginning of this military operation and this Ukraine proxy war. So the fact that it's even in this peace plan to say on number 7 that Ukraine agrees to enshrine its constitution and it will not join NATO, and NATO agrees to include it in its statutes, a provision that Ukraine will not be admitted in the future. And then Europe is saying, and when we say the Europe plan, by the way, I just want to say that it's France, Britain, and Germany who are heading this plan. Ukraine joining NATO depends on consensus of NATO members, which does not exist. So they're trying to, again, assert the power of NATO. But why even, you know what I mean? Like, in a peace plan, just say that Ukraine is not going to be part of NATO. If the consensus doesn't exist anyway, then just put that forth. And, you know, so that there's a diplomatic pathway for Russia to accept the deal.
And another point that I think is far more outrageous than, it's difficult to say that, but the EU proposal is more outrageous than the Trump one, and it's far more cynical, because
it's a counterpoint to the Trump one. So it's like Trump's one, they accused Trump of being too pro-Russia and then came with their counter. So I think they watered down almost everything that could be seen as something favoring Russia, but in a way that makes them think that they're winning, but they're not.
Yeah, that's right. I think EU has no leverage to negotiate anything without Russia, without consenting anything to Russia. If they would see the reality on the ground, what is happening, and if they would acknowledge that for a long-standing peace in Ukraine, you need the neutralization of Ukraine. You need to say Ukraine will never be part of NATO. NATO will not expand again. This is the reason that this is what the EU needs to acknowledge in the first place if they want to talk about peace. They have been expanding and expanding and expanding. And there is a history with Russia. You know, they are not both empty books. And we've seen the Cold War, how this racism and Russophobia is persistent here. The EU needs to do their own homework that led us to this. They are as Annalena Baerbock said, they were at war with Russia. They need to put their guns down as well. And part of it is to say, Ukraine, if you want to be part of the EU, be my guest, but they don't want that. Of course, they don't want that. Less so now that Ukraine is absolutely destroyed. And what they don't want, but they want to keep it in NATO. This is not workable. This is outrageous. This is sheer cynicism.
It's provocation, right? And then also
total provocation. Yes, it's a total provocation.
A commenter points out here that UK is allegedly no longer a member of the EU, and that is correct. The UK is not part of the EU. So why are they even the ones suggesting these things in this peace, supposed peace plan?
What we call like a omnipotence fantasy. They still think they rule the world. They still think they are an empire, and they are strong enough to be doing all this alone. You know, we'll do whatever we want because in the end everything will come out well. We'll know our way out. We've been pirates in the world for centuries, and we always won. I think that's their perspective. It's a colonial mentality. Yeah, and
they have a colonial mentality, and they also just
the EU plan is capitulation. They want Russia to capitulate, demand full Russian withdrawal, nothing to gain. Look, you need to have some sense of realism. What is going on? How did you contribute to that? How are you still contributing to that? How you used Ukraine to provoke Russia? How you supported a Nazi? Let's be clear, it's not a neo-Nazi. Zelensky is a Nazi. He has Azov and other Nazi on their payroll, on the military payroll. Who are the best people that follow no military rules, no military hierarchy? They'll go on killing, torturing. Are Nazis. Nazis are perfect for such type of incursion. And Ukraine never reviewed its history. I cannot even say we can talk about the neo-Nazis in Ukraine because I think they never had a point of rupture with Nazism that happened there. And historically, I don't think it would be accurate to say this. So they are supporting a man who is openly a Nazi, supporting a Nazi, carrying Nazi emblematic elements.
This is again another example of why we need to just completely retire the idea that the EU or the US empire in any way has any moral authority. Exactly the same issue with Netanyahu openly backing and actively participating in a genocide, and to think and to claim that they have any moral authority against Russia is completely delusional. And this is again this supposed EU, even though it includes UK, counter plan to the 28-point Trump plan, which again, like I was saying, is it's not self-sacrifice, a self-sacrifice on the US's part. It holds a lot of things that are very beneficial for the US, but it at least allows some sort of attempt to start a peace discussion, which is what Russia sort of indicated. They said it's a good baseline to start further discussions. Obviously, Zelensky was like, no, we're never going to give up territory. But Zelensky is, and this one last point before we move on to the Bolsanaro story, which I'm really interested in hearing about. But this last point is that we're finally getting some news reports on Zelensky's corruption now, but we have to remember that, like, this is a gravy train for Zelensky, right? But we have to remember that these murmurings of corruption actually were already reported by Seymour Hersh in 2023. Yeah. So it's not new at all. It's only now hitting like more mainstream outlets. And there's a reason for that. And the reason, I think, is that the US is now pushing for a peace plan with Russia because they want to focus on China. And again, in this thing, inherent, when we talked about the economic reasons for the US to put the AI infrastructure, data centers, rare earth minerals, is they are trying as well to not only compete with China in these markets, but also maybe to put a wedge between Russia and China in some way.
Absolutely, Ileana. I think Trump seems to have more of a pragmatic direction than the EU. Clearly, as you say, he wants to drive a wedge. It's the worst thing is that to have Russia and China in the same boat. Guess what? They already are. They're both BRICS. And I don't think he will be so capable of driving a wedge there because Russia has a sense of, has a strong nationalism, in particularly with Putin. You may or may not like his policy. You may be divided about what he thinks, but he's a nationalist. He will go for, he has a sense of direction for Russia, whether with authoritarian elements or not, but he does. And this no EU, I think nobody name for me a EU head of state that has a sense of direction for their country of the EU. I find it really difficult to picture anyone with expression, with leadership. I don't think there is one. And I don't think they have a plan. I think they're constantly distracting, militarizing, feeling it's Europe has become in the past 10 years incredibly more militarized, incredibly more racist, and incredibly poorer, where they are very basic and pre-political suggestions for society. So they have a ruling class which is mainly very mediocre. If you think about the Ursula von der Leyen, we knew her in Germany. She used to be the Ministry for Family. I don't think any sense she spoke at that time made sense. She's just a careerist. I was shocked that she got so much power. And I think maybe these people, they are the right ones to sit there because they follow the money. You know, they will do whatever they're told to be done.
Exactly. You need these types of very mediocre people to be the most obedient U.S. puppets, U.S. empire puppets. I mean, you absolutely can't have someone who has real leadership skill or real thoughtfulness. I mean, that would be deadly in that sort of scenario. They need someone that is just a hollow shell of a vampire. And that's what they've got. They've got loads of vampires. Keir Starmer is one of them, which yes, we'll be talking about more with Asa when he comes on, but maybe onto some good news now.
Look, Ileana, I'm going to try to share this screen. Guys, I am having technical problems. I'm really a digital monkey, but maybe that will work this time around. Oh yeah, hip hip hooray, it did. So I'm just going to, I want to talk about Bolsonaro a little bit. Bolsonaro is the Brazilian former president, and we have amazing news today. Okay, my computer is now, oh no, it's working. So we know that Jair Bolsonaro began to serve a 27-year prison sentence for plotting a coup d'etat against the Supreme Court, against the Brazilian state, and the Supreme Court ruled that they didn't rule that his conviction was final, but he was arrested. Why he was arrested? It's absolutely ridiculous. He was arrested this Saturday on the 22nd because authorities discovered that he was tampering with his court-ordered ankle monitor. Yes, I think we have a video. I'm going to show you this video. So Bolsonaro is a video from the Brazilian police where Bolsonaro, you show the tempered ankle monitor, and he said, oh yeah, I was using a soldering iron on this monitoring since last afternoon. Out of curiosity. He said he was just trying to break it open out of curiosity. Yeah. and the device is so badly damaged and burnt as it was attached to his ankle. And of course, it's also flabbergasting what he says afterwards. He says, well, his lawyers on his behalf said, well, actually, Bolsonaro was under new medication. He wasn't feeling very well. He began to hallucinate. And yeah, that's the bracelet. This is the federal police asking him how he tempered with it. And he's saying, well, no, I just did it out of curiosity. Let's watch this one.
Yeah, so this is him, right? You can just talk about this. This is him saying, oh, he's just curious. About what would happen.
But then it was voices in my head that made me do it. This is the official video of the Brazilian police. Look at what he did. And some people ask, why he didn't just cut the bracelet? Well, he couldn't cut it because it has fiber optics that will immediately sound the alarm. But, the most interesting is the party around this. His son prepared a vigil for him on the day before. And the plan was that the vigil will become really full and there will be some unrest there, and Bolsonaro will just disappear within the multitude after having break free from his ankle monitor. So this was the plan, a very elaborate plan. Let's say, but
Bolsonaro do PL do Rio de Janeiro, na noite deste sábado, para rezar pela saúde e liberdade de Jair Bolsonaro, terminou em tumulto. A confusão começou depois que um homem que se apresentou como pastor discursou a favor da prisão do ex-presidente.
This is the vigil that his son organized for him. So the idea would be that Bolsonaro, free from his ankle monitor after he operated with the soldering iron, he will be among the people and he would just suddenly disappear. And the question is, where would he go? So this is a lot of speculation. We know Bolsonaro has a history of attempting to flee. He tried in 2024, last year. He spent several nights in the Hungary embassy. He talked to Viktor Orban, saying, well, I might need to have asylum in your embassy. We know that Bolsonaro wrote 33 pages to Milei, who is Argentinian president, who talks to dogs, by the way. He was claiming a political persecution and he was fearing for his life. And the police recovered this on time along with his passport. And people ask, what is Bolsonaro convicted for? Well, Bolsonaro and several allies from the military are convicted for attempting to overthrow Brazilian democracy following the 2022 elections, which he's lost. Of course, before, when he tried in many ways to overturn this election, the coup attempt on the 8th of January in American style, it was actually not an event that needs to be seen as a single event. It's just the culmination of a series of attempts to overthrow democracy in Brazil. So Bolsonaro and his group financed military groups people to be in front of military headquarters, asking for the suspension of the Brazilian constitution, for American military intervention in Brazil for months. They were feeding this machine. So they're feeding also fake news and disinformation about the elections in Brazil. The same, he was saying the Brazilian system is flawed. The same system that elected him, it was flawed. That time it wasn't flawed. The system itself was flawed. People from Bolsonaro's party invaded the system, asked for a hacker to invade the system. And what we saw culminating, the climax was on the 8th of January 2022. After he lost the elections, the supporters stormed into government buildings in Brasilia. And they destroyed things, Ileana. They set things on fire. They shut on places. They destroyed art from Brazilian artists, very renowned arts. They just throw it on the floor. This shows the level of disregard to knowledge, to science, to art, to culture, to history. They disregard everything. And that's the mentality of these people. So they vandalized what we call the three power house, where the parliament sits, the presidency sits, and the Supreme Court. And this was upon Bolsonaro architecture, orchestrated, well-financed request. And guess what? What the Americans couldn't do with Trump, we did with Bolsonaro. We are setting an example of independent justice system. Bolsonaro is in jail for a good reason, and there are many other reasons why he could be in jail. One of them is the attempted genocide of indigenous people in Brazil during the pandemic. This was part of one of my research in my master's degree, and Bolsonaro did an entire architecture to kill indigenous ethnicities in Brazil. It's absolutely absurd. We can talk in details about that, but basically you would say allowing violence, not respecting their territories, with gun violence, putting the police with gun violence in those territories, making them starve, not deliver medication, and that the list goes on. And well, Bolsonaro is now in the 12 square meter room with a bed. Well, but he has a private room. He has air conditioning. He has TV. He has a desk. Thankfully, no contact with other inmates, but he has much more than many people in Brazil has. He has air conditioning, TV. Yeah, they have prepared a really nice corner for him there, and hopefully he will stay there a bit longer. And but it's a good news. It's showing that the system, the judicial system, understood how dangerous it is to have a president attempting a coup d'etat when he does not get the election his way, when the people's will goes against his will.
So what sort of geopolitical implications can we expect? Because earlier this year, Trump used the Bolsonaro trial for a pretext to impose, I think, something like 50% tariffs on Brazil. Can we expect some pushback from the US? What do you think?
We had already the pushback from the US after President Trump met Lula. He withdrew from the tariffs. We need to remember that Bolsonaro's son went with confidential state security information to Trump and requested Trump to impose tariffs on Brazil, to impose sanctions, and Trump explicitly said, I'm doing this because I want Jair Bolsonaro free. I mean, Trump is not even Brazilian president is supposed to interfere in the justice system, less so an American president in Latin America. So I think Trump realized how irrational was the tariffs on Brazil, and he had to go back because.
So, I mean, he said to them, if you do not do something about this, I'll put these actually he's putting these tariffs because of the trial against Bolsonaro, but now they're actually they've actually imprisoned him for 27 years and he's not going to do anything.
No, he's not going to do anything. I think it's a huge blow to something very dangerous. It's a huge blow to the ultra, to the far right, which is internationally organized. We saw last week here with the attempted colored revolution in Mexico, how this was a far right organized coup between Latin American people and American people, very well financed. And I think it's a blow. It's a huge blow for the international network of far right. Brazil is signalizing them that there are barriers, and these barriers called democracy, rights, people's rights, and sovereignty to decide. So I think that it does send a very powerful message. And we have a further problem here, because for them, Bolsonaro and his sons were the one who enhanced and made more explicit, but also increased the relationships with the far right international. Who is gonna jump into Bolsonaro's legacy now that he's a dead body in the politics? Nobody knows at the moment. Who's gonna do that? Bolsonaro's daughter's son, he will be in jail soon as well. As soon as he set foot in Brazil, he will be in jail for giving a foreign country Brazilian documentation, of confidential documentation, and trying to organize a coup d'etat, trying to organize a tariffs against his own country. You know, who pays the tariffs? These are Brazilian people. So the Bolsonaro family now is a huge blow for the Bolsonaro family. Who's going to stay with his legacy? We see this, and I think this shows that Latin American democracy is maturing. Is maturing after so many years of U.S. intervention. Brazil could negotiate. Yeah, could negotiate with U.S. because they have a more varied portfolio of partners. They have China, they have Russia, they have the world over, they have Africa, and this makes them more independent. So in the end, U.S. was more dependent to the Brazilian economy than the other way around. Wow, what a blow! I didn't think I would live to see this.
Okay. Well, I'm hopeful, and I'm hoping that let's leave this story here because it started on a good, it ended on a good note, and we can follow up later. But
let's see what Trump we have. Can you put this? I will put this one. Let's just finish with Trump pretending surprised about Bolsonaro's imprisonment. I think I sent you the link. It's the minute 41 seconds, and you see Trump pretending he's complete. I think he's pretending, Ileana. I don't know what's your take. What's the take of people watching us? I think he's pretending surprise. Oh, I talked to Bolsonaro yesterday, and I think we're going to meet very soon. And all of a sudden, he's in jail.
So it's virtual Maddow. Okay. Let's see what it.
You need to put the sound on.
Oh, this right. Okay. Is this sound working? Oh my God. Sorry.
It is. Do you have any comments on Bolsonaro's arrest? The reporter asks the former Brazilian president. Look at his face.
Okay, it's not working for some reason, but essentially, he says. Let's see what he says.
He says they will be meeting in the near future. That talked to Bolsonaro the day before. That raises question. There are some rumors that Bolsonaro wanted to go. So this is speculative. Bolsonaro wanted to go to the U.S. embassy. So yeah, it could be that he asked for Trump's help in this conversation. I would bet my money that he asked. Trump is confirming to have talked to Bolsonaro the day before his arrest. So, and then he was already tampering with the bracelet. So I will have to assume, and I think everyone will have to assume, that he asked for Trump's help. What Trump said, I do not know, but he seems to be pretending, oh God, he was arrested. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not.
I doubt it. I mean,
just to because my technical problem here. I will try to get into the computer because my battery on the phone is dying out. If you can just remove me for...
Okay. Well, in that case, I will let Asa Winstanley onto the stage because he's in the studio waiting patiently. And of course, we are off schedule. We were supposed to finish 3 news stories. We finished 2. We have 1 more to go, but let's get Asa on and cover some really interesting topics with Asa. So I'm just going to add him to the stage. And Sarah, you can figure out your technical issues. But welcome, Asa Winstanley.
Hi.
Hi, how are you doing? I'm going to do your little bio again because I did it at the top of the show, but that felt like 800 years ago. But essentially, Asa Winstanley is an investigative journalist and an associate editor at the Electronic Intifada. He's the author of Weaponizing Anti-Semitism, How the Israel Lobby Brought Down Jeremy Corbyn, and his Substack is called Palestine is the Issue. So, now that we've got your wonderful bio, how are you doing?
And I want to thank Asa once more for coming to the show, because when I was doing my master's degree, I've interviewed Asa on Keir Starmer's war on journalists, upgrading the war on journalists as the war on terror. And I'm very grateful for the interview you gave to me. And yeah, I'm just popping out for a little while just to charge my phone, and I'll be back with you guys. Thanks, Asa.
Yeah, don't take it personally, Asa. It's not you. So how's it going?
Yeah, pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to get into some serious topics. So I guess we shouldn't be cracking too many jokes right now. But I will be plugging the interview that we did. I actually did an interview with Asa talking about journalists under attack on Global Majority for Peace. So I'm going to show just I'm going to figure out how to do this. But essentially, you came on Global Majority for Peace, and here it is. Okay. Just this is what it looks like, guys. Sorry, we paused on not a great part, but essentially we talk about a lot of really interesting things here, and we get going a little bit more into your book.
Was invited there by
But anyway, so we've got you here today to cover quite a few different things. I mean, all related to Palestine, which is the issue. I've heard, and
it's still the issue.
Still the issue. Yes, absolutely. And you wrote an article. You wrote an article not yesterday, but you posted an article yesterday that gives us an update on the Palestine Action court case that's currently happening. So I'm just going to give for international audiences who don't know what Palestine Action is. I have another interview to plug. No, I do, but. Also, Palestine Action, for those who don't know, it was co-founded by Hudama Omari, who I interviewed as well, and it's on this channel. And it basically takes a really interesting strategy, which is, because I always talk about how U.S. empire needs to be dismantled via the 3 pillars: military, financial, and propaganda. And Palestine Action, with their limited resources, was a direct action group that targeted Elbit systems in the UK. So by doing that, simple actions, direct actions, throwing paint on their headquarters and their offices, in their factories, that disrupt the financial pillar of capitalism, because it does disrupt the workday of it. And then that's sort of the first stage of the direct action. It causes media coverage, but it also disrupts the general workday of this Elbit Systems, which is it the biggest Israeli arms manufacturer?
Yeah, that's right. It's the biggest private Israeli arms manufacturer, but it's these private companies are very closely linked to the state.
Right.
Yeah. They manufacture 80% of Israel's drones. That's what I understand.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So exactly. So, and they did that over a period of 18 months, and it was really effective. It actually did cause the shutdown of, I think, 2 factories and the headquarters, I think. But
There was a third one as well, a third factory that shut down after they were banned, so as like a knock-on effect for their campaigning. So even while they were banned, they managed to shut down a fourth facility of Elbit, which is in the UK. There's around 10 left, I believe. Although it shifts because there's, most of these factories, they're not called Elbit, they're called different things, Instro, Precision, they're subsidiaries of Elbit who were bought out in some way, usually.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Because they don't want to be maybe too overt about it. But
I think that's part of it. Yeah.
And I think that could be a testament to how actions were working, maybe in terms of media coverage and awareness.
Yeah, they were very successful, and they were considered a threat by Elbit, by the state of Israel itself, when in the beginning, when Palestine Action started in 2020, soon after, the government ministers at the time met with an Israeli minister who was a representative of the Strategic Affairs Ministry, as was at the time, which was essentially, the Strategic Affairs Ministry was essentially a kind of semi-covert government agency, which was a sort of it was really a spy agency, which was sort of disguised with this innocuous name, the Strategic Affairs Ministry, which its main purpose for the longest time was actually to combat the Palestine solidarity movement around the world in terms of boycott, divestment and sanctions. And they were very active against Jeremy Corbyn, which I know we're going to get onto a little bit. And yeah, they directly met with government ministers in 2020, asking them to take action against Palestine Action, to prevent Palestine Action. And eventually they got their way.
Yeah, so in June of this year, Yvette Cooper made an official statement to prescribe Palestine Action. That's what we're basically talking about now under Section 3 of the Terrorism Act. So on Wednesday this week, Huda Omari is did launch a formal legal challenge at the High Court, arguing the ban is a misuse of anti-terror laws, which obviously it is. However, you sort of get into some of like the, I guess, behind the scenes is one way of putting it. In your recent article for Electronic Intifada, you report that the initial High Court Justice Martin Chamberlain, an expert on free speech law, was abruptly replaced. So can you get us up to date on what's happening with this case in the trial and what you uncovered in your article?
Yeah, sure. So in June, as you mentioned, as soon as Yvette Cooper made this announcement that she was intending to ban Palestine Action as a terrorist group, which is a completely unprecedented misuse of British law, of anti-terror law, to target a direct action campaign group, Huda and the rest of the Palestine Action people, they started opposing it straight away, and their legal team they wanted to stop the ban. They tried to stop the ban from going into operation. They were unable to get the injunction, the immediate injunction, to prevent the ban from going into operation, and it did at the beginning of July, I believe. Technically, it went into operation. And so then, there's been a series of hearings over the last few months. The government has really opposed at every step, every legal remedy that Huda and Palestine Action have tried to make to overturn this ban. It's a tall order, to be honest. Like, it's a tall order to overturn an anti-terror ban in the British law. As far as I know, has never been done. But also it is unprecedented what the Labour government has done to Palestine Action, because this after all is a direct action. It's essentially, it's a peaceful group in the sense of it carries out economic sabotage, right? It doesn't harm people. It doesn't harm living beings. It carries out direct action against property, against against arms firms. So the legal argument they've been making all along, with some success, especially in the initial stages of Palestine action, was that the sabotage they were carrying out, this sort of economic sabotage, was proportional action to stop a greater crime, which was war crimes, and now genocide in Gaza and the rest of Palestine. And so that was successful when those cases for alleged criminal damage and so forth actually made it to jury trials and even to magistrates. More often than not, it was success. They were successful in that legal argument, and so it became such a successful organization that Palestine Action, the government, under pressure from the pro-Israel lobby, has had to outlaw the group, really stopping its direct action campaign. And so we are now in this case where Huda has been seeking, as you said, the co-founder of Palestine Action, Huda Amori, is pursuing a judicial, what's called in British law, a judicial review, where a judge or a panel of judges, as it turns out to be the case in this case, examines the legality of government action, in this case an anti-terror ban on Palestine Action. And as you said, Ileana, in the introduction, this Judge Chamberlain was due to rule on it. The hearing was initially supposed to go ahead earlier this week, on the 25th, on Tuesday, and it was actually delayed a day, and there was the week, just only a few days before, there was a change to the judges. Chamberlain was taken off it. I understand he's an expert on Article 10 of the free speech of the European human rights free speech law, which is part of British law, even though Britain is no longer in the EU. We still have European human rights law integrated into our law. So especially in terms of free speech, and he is really an expert on that, and that is a large part of Palestine Action's of Huda's case against this ban for the judicial review, and so he would have been an immensely suitable judge. Instead, at the last minute, in a really unusual move, Chamberlain was replaced by these three judges. The first one, Victoria Sharp, who you can see on the screen here. And what was found in my research and the research of others was that her brother, Richard Sharp, the man in the middle, former chairman of the BBC, incidentally, sits on a board of a charity with the man on the right, Trevor Chin, who is one of the UK's most prominent and richest pro-Israel lobbyists. So this certainly meets the criteria. Even that alone, before we even get into the Robert Maxwell stuff, which is really huge in my opinion, even that alone creates what could be termed the perception of a conflict of interest, which should be enough for any reasonable judge to recuse themselves in any other case. And that indeed was why Richard Sharp ended up stepping down as chairman of the BBC, because he was connected to he failed to declare his connections to $1 million loan, the equivalent of $1 million, to Boris Johnson, who was Prime Minister at the time that he was appointed to the BBC. So there was no connection to Israel in that case. But he stepped down because there was an investigation found there was a potential perceived conflict of interest. Well, certainly this meets that definition, I would say. So she should have recused herself, but the opposite seems to have happened. She seems to have been put on. Another person, another one of the judges on this new panel as well, Jonathan Swift, was the judge who denied Julian Assange's appeal against extradition to the United States. So, you know, the campaigners who have been taking civil disobedience against the ban on Palestine action have come out this week and said that, you know, this looks very much like a stitch up, an absolute conflict of interest. So yeah, that's the long and short.
We also know what Victoria Sharp did last summer. Victoria Sharp, she also ruled in the Julian Assange case because the first judge, Baritza, she found in favor of Assange, and Sharp, she overruled the decision based on the so-called special administrative measures that the U.S. could assure he will be very well taken care of, whatever that means, in the U.S. So Victoria Sharp also participated in the High Court ruling that set aside the first instance.
Okay, well, I mean that's I didn't know that. That's fascinating. Yeah, I mean it just shows how much of a establishment fix up this is. I mean, the British.
It shows that they're reaching a very important principle in law, which you don't have ad hoc judgments. The way judges get their cases should be random. They should not. Of course, you have a specialist, but who exactly would judge who? One of the basic principles of justice is that you don't pick and choose. And here, what Electronic Intifada review is a absurd conflict of interest, a bland conflict of interest. I would not even say it's an appearance. It is a conflict of interest, full-blown textbook conflict of interest. And shall we not ask ourselves, can judges be part of such friends of Israel? Can judges be part of this type of political activity involved in genocide? Are they fit to sit a bench? I think here comes another. Are they at all, those judges at all, able to sit a bench if they are supporting a genocide that we all know it is one, and you can no longer deny it? Asa, it's absolutely incredible what you guys found out here, and the relationships of both judges that judged Assange being handpicked. It indicates they are being handpicked, and they are perverting justice itself. You know, you have a class here that are perverting the justice system. It does certainly looks like.
That's certainly what some of the campaigners seem to be alleging. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure she would argue that she's not responsible for, you know, whatever her brother gets up to and so forth. But we also have the fact of her historical, you know, she obviously, before she was a judge, she was a barrister, and this is going a way back now, but in the late 80s, one of her clients was Rupert Murdoch, which, who, you know, he was a newspaper mogul, famously litigious, and one of the works that she carried out for him was working against was trying to get a book banned, essentially. There was a biography by an author called Tom Bowers, which, I mean, he's not even an anti-Israel journalist by any stretch of the imagination, Tom Bauer, but this biography, and in fact he wrote a book about Jeremy Corbyn, which was very critical of Jeremy Corbyn, shall we say. But anyway, she tried to get this book, you know, she was part of the legal team. Victoria Sharp was part of the legal team which sued Tom Bauer and tried to get this book really prevented from publication. I mean, it's extraordinary. I mean, he later wrote a second biography of Robert Maxwell. this, I read some of it this week and for the research for this book, and it's quite extraordinary the vindictiveness, how vindictive Robert Maxwell was when it came to the perceived his perceived enemies, people who wrote even mildly critical things about him. He really tried to take this journalist out, Tom Bauer. He spied on him, essentially. He hired a private detective, according to Tom Bauer. Maxwell hired a private detective. He tried to obtain this was too much granular detail to make it into the article, but allegedly Maxwell tried to obtain the contents of his computer, and all these kind of extraordinary measures. He pursued bookshops around the world who in Britain who wanted to publish the book, tried to prevent it from being published in paperback, and so on and so forth. It's quite an extraordinary story. And Sharp, in all of this, Victoria Sharp was said by Bauer in the second book that he wrote about Maxwell. Victoria Sharp was one of the 4 principal advisors to Robert Maxwell in trying to censor journalists' critical reporting of his business activities and so forth. And so, the quote from the book was that they pursued the 4 principal advisors, including Victoria Sharp, who's now judging this case. Quote, they pursued his mission, Robert Maxwell's mission, with depressing vigor, commitment, and pitilessness. The other 3 advisors were Victor Mishcon, Anthony Julius, and Richard Rampton, QC. And it's notable, if we want to get into the Israel connection with Robert Maxwell now, it's notable that his law firm, the law firm that she was, as a barrister, which she was instructed by, was Mishcon de Reya, which for many years now has been essentially Israel's chosen law firm in the United States, in the United Kingdom. That they have carried out a lot of work. They have a whole specialist Israel department. They have carried out cases on behalf of the Israeli embassy and the Israeli Prime Minister at the time, Ariel Sharon. That case there was a case of a famous cartoon in the early 2000s during the Second Intifada, while Ariel Sharon was, decimating the West Bank in the so-called Operation Defensive Shield, where they were just killing Palestinians. And there was a cartoon in The Independent which depicted Ariel Sharon as a monster, as he was. And Mishcon de Reya tried to sue The Independent and get the cartoon removed and so forth. They claimed it, of course, that it was anti-Semitic. This was later, after Victoria Sharp was doing work for Maxwell, but it gives you a sense of what Mishcon de Reya's mission is. A large part of it is to protect Israel. They've also, I've covered cases 10 years ago or more where they were acting against the UCU, the University and College Union, the lecturers union, the academic union in the UK, which had not even a policy, but just a discussion. They wanted to have a discussion. Some of their activists wanted to have a discussion about potential academic boycotts of Israel. And then they were sued by the pro-Israel lobby. And Mishcon de Reya, Anthony Julius, who I mentioned before, is one of the principal advisors of Robert Maxwell, along with Victoria Sharp, was acting pro bono in that case. So, they've done a lot of pro-Israel work over the years. And Robert Maxwell himself is widely regarded as having been a very high-powered intelligence asset for Mossad, for the state of Israel. And that's what these books, if you read these books, it details all of that. He was kind of kind of almost a Jeffrey Epstein of his day, although I don't know of any allegations that he sexually trafficked young girls. That doesn't apply to him, but he was certainly involved in other criminal activities.
I suppose that's a rabbit hole I don't necessarily want to go down, but I mean, his daughter is Julian Maxwell.
We'll be here all day if we do that. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, his daughter is Julian. So there's, it kind of makes sense that she would be involved in the Epstein situation, certainly. And I think what you're really highlighting here, as we mentioned before, Assange case as well, and the interference in that case with the U.S. Very famously, Keir Starmer went to Washington 4 times when he was the director of the Crown Prosecution.
Yeah, director of CPS, yeah, Crown Prosecution Service, yeah, the chief, sort of like the British Attorney General, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that they deleted lots of files and evidence in regards to how they dealt with the Assange case that suggested collusion between them, the US, Sweden, etc. So we're showing like a pattern that I think dates back really who knows how long at this point of interference behind the scenes of the judicial system. But certainly, as we've talked about a lot on this show, I guess, because inevitably the outsized power of Israel, although I maintain still that it is part of the US empire. However, and speaking of the US empire again, I guess we can ask you your second question, which
well, before you do that, I just want to make one final point on Victoria Sharp, which is that because we mentioned Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, I just want to point out that there's, I'm sure my solicitors would want me to say this as well, but just for fairness and accuracy, and as I point out in the article, there's no suggestion that Victoria Sharp was aware of Jeffrey Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell's criminality, or even the full scope of Robert Maxwell's espionage activities on behalf of the State of Israel. There's no suggestion of that, but he was known at the time by his closest advisors that he had some sort of ties to Israel. So she must have had some inkling of something, but be that as it may, I think the overall point is, as you both said, that the whole thing, taken as a whole, reeks of an establishment fix.
Right. And also the other thing you mentioned, which was the EU freedom of speech, the ECHR, I think something law that still applies
European
to
Court of Human Rights. Yeah.
European Court of Human Rights, right? ECHR. That was something that we cited a lot during the Assange campaign. And so it is also not a coincidence, I think, that Victoria Sharp is again the judge presiding against a freedom of speech case. So there's that other link as well.
I didn't even know that. I mean, that's important. Yeah,
it's interesting, which Sarah brought up. Sarah, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I have a very important question here for you. We've seen Trump's peace plan for Gaza. That is nothing short of a colonial partition of Gaza. And it's incredible because we need to talk again of another elite criminal, former British Prime Minister and war criminal Tony Blair. He is playing a significant role in this new governing of Gaza, a third country in the Middle East. And my question to you, how should we understand the role of Tony Blair in this governing? And we know Blair led the UK into the Iraq war on the basis of a deliberate orchestrated lie that it was later proved by an independent investigation. He knew that Saddam Hussein had no chemical weapons, there was not a threat. And we would expect him to be fully banned from the political life, but he's not banned, he's being rewarded with Gaza how does Blair get his foot again in the door? Who interest is he serving? What do we know for our foreign audience of how come Blair comes here as a savior, a war criminal?
Yeah, I mean, he's certainly been part of the discussions. You know, it's kind of gone back and forth, because when there was the ceasefire, the so-called ceasefire, which, you know, I'm sure we'll get onto, but you know, when there was an agreement between Palestinian resistance factions and the Trump administration, essentially. You know, I mean, this speaks to the question of U.S. empire and the unity between the Israeli regime and the U.S. empire. But there was talk of Tony Blair being a kind of neo-colonial governor for the Gaza Strip. And then when the ceasefire was signed, Trump kind of rolled that back a bit. You know, he said on the day that he flew into Tel Aviv for his speech, which I watched in full for my sins, in Air Force One, when he was asked about Tony Blair, he said, well, you know, we'll have to see about Tony Blair, because, you know, not everybody likes him, kind of thing. So he was talking about the, I mean, my read on that is he was talking about the Qataris and so forth, who, you know, whose pocket he's also in, as well as the Israel lobby's pocket in terms of people like, in terms of mainly Miriam Adelson, the inheritor of Sheldon Adelson's casino billions and his pro-Israel empire. But so, you know, it seems for the moment, Tony Blair, the war criminal, is out of the picture. But like it, as far as I know, you know, but obviously, you know, Trump's so erratic. I guess it could be brought back at any time. But you know, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think Tony Blair is very likely. However, you know, the UN, the plan that was agreed at the UN Security Council, and what Trump now wants to happen in Gaza, and what the Israelis want to happen in Gaza, and what the Palestinian Authority has agreed to in Gaza, it has to be said, because the Palestinian Authority is a collaborationist entity with the Israeli occupation, and it always has been. Yeah, I mean, it's a kind of neo-colonial occupation of the Gaza Strip. That's what they want to happen, and the Israelis, you know, with this yellow line, they are still occupying a massive swathe of the Gaza Strip, and they're still carrying on genocidal actions in the Gaza Strip, as well as in the West Bank. So
to give some sort of context for that, so the supposed historic ceasefire, in quotations, guys, was announced on October 10th of this year. And of course, Trump declared it. He declared it, presenting as the first step in his broader 20-point peace plan, which I suppose we're seeing now that has been backed by the UN, that you're talking about. But also, since then, reports say that Israel has committed nearly 500 violations. So that's just in 6 weeks. They've committed over 500 violations, killing over 340 civilians and injuring hundreds more. Of course, this is on top of all the other siege, like, you know, starvation, stuff like that, situation that they're facing. But you know, this peace plan that we've talked about, we've called it a farce. The UN-backed peace plan, we covered it last week. It implements a UN-mandated transitional administration with Trump Board of Peace overseeing governance. And like we mentioned earlier in this show, it's quite ridiculous to have the genocidal force, essentially because of U.S. active participation in the genocide in Gaza, being the one that is also supposed to oversee governance and peace. It's completely ridiculous. And what it does is it makes the U.S.'s active participation actually in this genocide official, till 2027. Now there's an actual official status for them. Can you help us unpack the realities of the situation? And I mean, what does this mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've summed it up well there. I mean, yesterday, Amnesty International, yesterday or the day before, Amnesty International said, this isn't just, let's be realistic. Like, this is what is still happening in Gaza. The genocide is still ongoing. That's absolutely the case. You could potentially argue it's maybe slowed down a little bit, but it's, maybe there aren't quite as many people being killed every day in the Gaza Strip by Israel as there was before the ceasefire. You could argue that, but Amnesty International this week stated that Israel is still committing a genocide in Gaza despite the so-called ceasefire. This is not just us at Empire Watch saying that. It's not just people on Twitter saying that. This is the reality of what's happening to people on the ground in Gaza in terms of bombings, in terms of Israeli soldiers carrying out massacres of civilians, deliberately, drone strikes, and more important, almost more tellingly in a way, is the fact that Palestinians are still being denied any kind of aid that they need. People are still being starved. The aid deliveries that are being permitted and under the Israeli siege conditions are still far less than what is needed. This is the third year now, the third winter that Palestinians in Gaza have gone through this genocide, and the tents that they have, that refugees have, are and these are multiple generational refugees who have been displaced time and time and time again since 1948. The tents that they have had to use since 7th of October 2023 are now collapsing. They're under the third winter. So people are, as well as being bombed and directly genocided, are being genocided by lack of adequate shelter, food, medicine, and so forth. And this is systemic and deliberately being carried out by the Israelis, with now the direct involvement of the Americans and the British military in terms of spy flights and so forth. It's like you said, it's the idea that there's a board of peace by the genocider, by the genocidal powers. It's nonsensical. But the silver lining to all of this terrible situation is the fact that, they can say they're going to impose this board of peace, and they can say they're going to, there's not going to be any Palestinian involvement in the governance of Gaza except for collaborators like the Palestinian Authority or, the criminal ISIS gangs that they arm in Gaza. But none of that is realistic, because the reality on the ground is, despite what the Americans want to do, Hamas governance structures, the Palestinian government structures in the Gaza Strip, are still intact. That's the de facto reality on the ground. That's just what's happening. And so that, it's kind of all this board of peace stuff and the things about Palestinian resistance organizations disarming and so forth. It's really, it's wish casting.
Is wish casting, or do you think it's deliberately made to fail, and for Trump just to pretend, I am the peacemaker of the world? What do you think? Do you think they believe in their own plan?
I don't know. That's a good question. These things are sort of created by committee, right? So, I guess they want these things to happen, but it's not happening. That's the way I look at it. I'm not that motivated by I'm not that bothered by what they believe.
Right. Because most of the thing is like 90% marketing. Just seems like.
Yeah, and like if the so-called Great Plan for Gaza that if you read that, a few months ago before the ceasefire, I think it was in September when that came out, it was all made by AI. Like the diagrams in it and the images in it, it was it looked like something from Dubai, right? That there was going to be this new Gaza, and that Hamas will disarm, Palestinian resistance will disarm, and there'll be a new Trump Gaza, essentially Trump Elon Musk style sort of Gaza, but it's all an illusion.
It was a real estate plan, like pitched.
That's what it was. I mean, I think that's what he wants. Trump. I mean, who knows what Trump wants? He's an erratic manager of empire, I think. But like every U.S. president, increasingly in recent years, it's they're just frontmen who don't really, in a way, they don't seem to have much power. It's more about the system.
Right. There's a trajectory that they are just sort of adding on a different face to, but the trajectory's already been set, which is just more and more belligerence for U.S. empire. So I guess we can shift gears to the UK because that's a more hopeful project. That's sarcasm, by the way. But we did feel hopeful earlier this year, or some people did, when we were looking at the formation of a new political party via Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana called, it was tentatively called Your Party. So it's our party. I suppose it's all our parties. Now, of course, your book, Weaponizing Anti-Semitism, detailed how the downfall of Jeremy Corbyn was caused by the Israel lobby. Essentially, the Israel lobby trapped him into capitulating on anti-Zionism as it was conflated with anti-Semitism. And he did capitulate on that. I'm just summarizing this book very terribly.
No, that's about right, yeah.
You can see the cover very beautifully set on Asa's background. But yeah, it's a very good book on that. So 2 years on, of course, we're at a different state of public awareness because of October 7th. Now, Corbyn started this party with Zara Sultana with 4 other MPs. However, Adnan Hussein, which was one of the MPs, just recently resigned, citing persistent infighting, factionalism, and what he described as veiled prejudice against Muslim men. Now, that's quite a huge implosion just before the founding conference that actually will commence tomorrow in Liverpool. So how much of the playbook that you outlined in your book, Weaponizing Anti-Semitism, do you think has played into this pretty big mess of a political party beginning, let's just say? It's a pretty big...
Yeah, well, I think it's a very different context because what the context of my book and the context of Jeremy Corbyn's the hoax, I think we can really call it that, the hoax story that there was a crisis of anti-Semitism in Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party. The different context was that Corbyn was trying to accidentally take over the Labour Party. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, the Labour Party is, historically the Social Democratic Party of Britain, obviously, right? It comes from the trade unions, the British trade unions, and it was it gave and pursued some moderate social democratic advancements for the British population, right? So there was achievements like the NHS and so forth, but it was also, because when it came about was the early 20th century, and when it first got into government, it was also the manager of the British Empire, right? So it actually carried out the crimes of the British Empire, literally, like not like the British. I mean, Britain's position now is an interesting one because it's subordinate to the U.S. Empire.
But it's in the U.S. Empire.
Yeah, it's subordinate to the U.S. Empire. Like it has. There's literal American military bases in Britain. There's American nuclear weapons in Britain.
Yes.
So Britain does not really have true sovereignty in that way, right? Sure. But the British deep state is kind of uniquely aggressive and has a kind of independence whereby it's like it's. I mean, I think Kit Clarenberg at the Grey Zone and other outlets has got quite a good analysis of this, where he says that, like, the British spooks, the British deep state actually tried to make and lead the US Empire in a more aggressive way, right? They still think that the British Empire still exists in that way, and certainly the US Empire took over the large aspects of the British Empire and so forth after the Second World War. Anyway, I'm getting kind of off topic, but basically what I'm saying is the Labour Party was not good people, right? Right. They literally carried out imperialist crimes all over the world, and that included Palestine, right, where they were actually the Labour Party in the in the 40s and the 50s was more Zionist than the conservative right-wing party, actually. And so, that meant that there was like a long history of, it didn't even need to be controlled by the Israel lobby, because there was this confluence of views, like of imperialist views. Right. Within,
which is still the case. I mean, I think that's kind of
I also have a bit of a critical view towards Sultana. I think she has been. I don't think she is an anti-imperialist per se. I've seen her on Labour conference. Sultana, for people who are listening to us, I would say she's a British MP, member of Parliament, and she's sort of the protege of Jeremy Corbyn, or Jeremy Corbyn gives her a big chunk of space. I can recall very vividly when Lula, Brazilian president, was arrested and later he was freed, that Sultana went into a Brazilian Brazilian solidarity program and said that yes, and said that an Australian lawyer was responsible for Lula's freedom. So this is a statement of incredible ignorance and an imperialistic one. Lula was freed because he had a legacy. He removed 18 million people out of poverty because we had Brazilian institutions, Brazilian lawyers, Brazilian people fiercely pointing out towards the immense justice. Lula is not a man that only have words for people. He has a tremendous influence on Brazilian reality and legacy. He has a very tangible legacy in Brazil. And his fight was very consistent. The social fights in Brazil, we had the MST, which is the largest social movement in the world fighting for him. We had people of all walks of life fighting for. This was a Brazilian response that dismantled a coup and a color revolution made by the USA as court document review with the help of the DOJ and with the help of the State Department. The Brazilian coup that enjailed Lula was not made in Brazil alone. It had the intervention. And I recall when we went to ask Jeremy Corbyn for support for Lula, in the first moment, he was very hesitant. He said, well, what if Lula has done something? I mean,
Did
this
he?
shows also, yeah, he did. This shows a lack of understanding of how coups are made in Latin America. And I thought this was political illiteracy that has a direct relationship with anti-imperialism. And I think
that's really interesting.
I am
You say
not
that, Sarah.
convinced.
Like,
I'm not convinced Jeremy Corbyn is an anti-imperialist. Less so Sultana. It's not because you have heritage somewhere in the multipolar world that you are more equipped than someone that hasn't. And I'm very skeptical about the news party. Do you have a better news for me? Have they grown out of this role? Have they improved their views? Have they included people that are more in tune with Latin American politics? Like, let's say, Richard Bergen. Richard Bergen really knew what was going on from the beginning.
Let's not get into...
He did.
Richard Bergen is also Labour MP. So, I mean, I think the issue is your party was never established as a socialist party. It was established as a non-ideological, we're just starting a party. It's your party, so let's decide. And I think they're supposed to be deciding tomorrow. I mean, I don't know. But basically, the idea of starting a political party, and I had a really interesting conversation with Peter Mertens, the General Secretary of the Workers' Party of Belgium, but they have such a more well-thought idea of what does it mean to have a political party. How do you start it? What is your core principles? What are your tactics? What is your strategy? You need those things to be a genuine political party. Your party is not that. It's more like the brainstorming phase, like let's brainstorm something. But I think like what Asa was saying earlier was that to project onto the Labour Party this idea that they are anti-Zionist, anti-imperialist, socialist has always been a farce. I mean, that's not their origins. That's not their history. We shouldn't be expecting that from them because that is not what they've ever been, or maybe they've claimed to be, but in a very superficial way. So that's kind of your point, right? Like,
yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, more or less. I mean, it's really interesting what you're saying, Sarah, about the lack of anti-imperialism on the British left. Like, there's a real deep institutional problem there. That the anti-imperialism that exists is quite weak, and quite often, especially when it comes to politicians, quite superficial. And there's also a lack of understanding of, as you say, like the structures of where these kind of coups come from. That's really interesting that he said, "Oh, what if Lula has done something?" Like, surely, like the first assumption would be, well, obviously the CIA is getting involved. Right, so like that should be the starting point, because that's just the historical fact, and so it should be also the assumption that, well, of course, the British intelligence services are going to be trying to undermine any kind of socialist project. I mean, the lack of institutional, the lack of ideology, and the lack of any kind of socialist principles in the founding of your party is interesting, because in one of the leaked documents that came out a couple of months ago, there was an interim executive team to work towards this conference, the founding conference that's taking place this coming weekend. And in that document, it has a list of all the people who are going to be involved in legal, finance, comms, rules, events and conference planning, elections, so forth. And then under political strategy, it said, "What does your party stand for?" ? TBA, to be announced. So it can't even say TBA, socialism. TBA. It can't even say socialism. It's just literally TBA.
To be confirmed.
Yeah. So I know I don't have good news in that regard. We still have, a deep institutional problem and lack of awareness on the British left, especially.
And lack of courage, isn't it, Asa?
Yeah.
I mean, who are the people who stand with you when you were politically persecuted by by the UK. I think many people in those moments, they dread to be associated with people doing revolutionary work. Look at Palestine Action, and who stand by you in the Labour Party, or did Jeremy Corbyn stand by you? Those people who are claiming to be very imperialistic, did they stand by the journalists who were being relentlessly, brutally, and unjustly persecuted in a time of a genocide?
Zara Sultana did stand by Pal Action, right?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair to them, both
when it became a consensus. Well, they tend to go for those things when it's more of a consensus. Otherwise, when it was they tend to hide.
But that's kind of a big. I mean, I'm not caping for them, but I'm just saying that is a big deal that they spoke out when they were prescribed, right?
Both Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana have said very supportive things of Palestine Action. To be fair to them, Zara Sultana, upon the ban when it was being discussed, actually said in Parliament that this was technically before the ban, but when it was just about to come in, so it wasn't against the law, but she did say, I support Palestine Action, and she was like basically shouted down by the speaker, and they actually even removed it from Hansard, which is incredible, the official record of parliamentary proceedings, where she said she supported Palestine Action. Just to continue what I was starting to say, like, I don't have good news in that regard, but there is some good news. I mean, I think this is, it's been this whole Your Party thing that has been, I think it's fair to say, an absolute mess and a shit show. Like, there's been, there's been some very bitter recriminations between Corbyn and Sultana's respective teams. There's been a lot of what they've called psychodrama, which is a word I really hate, but like there's been a lot of back and forth. There's been some very nasty recriminations online, especially. However, I mean, I think there is a potential here, because what we saw, I mean, and this is what I talk about in my book, like what we saw in the Labour Party, for all the facts of how terrible the Labour Party is and has always been in many ways, there was an opening in 2015. There was a kind of a break with history. There was a popular mass movement which kind of tried to hijack the Labour Party in a good way, like to make it become what it always pretended to be, to make it into a socialist party that would be anti-imperialist, that would be pro-Palestine. And there was a kind of mass movement of entryism, not by like Trotskyist organizations or groupsicles and so forth, although of course they try to do their thing as always, but like there was a kind of mass movement that entered the Labour Party to support Jeremy Corbyn and to try to take it over, and it really frightened the British establishment, and it really frightened the Israeli establishment, and there was this kind of coup that took place within the Labour Party to get rid of Jeremy Corbyn. And now, long story short, and I mean, you can read the whole thing obviously in my book, but like long story short, that's all been purged out of the Labour Party, and this real establishment figure in Keir Starmer took it over, and he's very much literally in the pockets of the Israel lobby, and other British establishment millionaires and multi-millionaires, but he that whole movement didn't go away. It was kicked out of Labour, but now it exists, but it's homeless, and I think politically homeless. So I think that's where kind of the hope in Your Party is there is kind of a mass movement out there which is wanting socialism, it is wanting anti-imperialism, and especially with the genocide in Gaza, is actually wanting an explicitly aggressive anti-Zionism, which is one of the issues of contention between Zara Sultana and Jeremy Corbyn, where in the summer Zara Sultana came out explicitly and aggressively and said, I'm an anti-Zionist. There were mistakes made in the Labour Party leadership during the Corbyn era in terms of concessions to the pro-Israel lobby, in terms of concessions to the false definition of anti-Semitism that is preferred by Israel, and that we shouldn't have done those things, and it was a mistake that was made. She didn't directly criticise Jeremy Corbyn, but he seemed to take it to heart quite personally, and made some sort of counter comments in an interview with Middle East Eye and so forth. And there are other issues as well. The British left is very good at falling out against itself.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go on.
We're going to just finish. I was just going to squeeze in there. Is the opening that you're talking about, though, has it been filled by Zach Polanski of the Green Party? What are your views on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, you're right. Like, part of that movement has certainly entered the Green Party as well. That definitely. I mean, that's definitely the case. I mean, I literally know of people who were supportive of Corbyn, and even in the Labour Party during the Corbyn era, who have now left and joined the Green Party, and that's why there has been a massive influx of members to the British Green Party. Again, they're trying to turn it towards the left and to make it into a socialist party, an anti-imperialist party, and so forth. But I mean, I think a problem that a lot of people have with the Green Party is that historically the European Green parties, and I think the American Green parties is kind of it's much better. It's an exception to this. The American Green Party is far more to the left, but historically European Green parties have ended up being incredibly right wing and incredibly imperialist, and I mean you only have to look at the German Green Party for that. And so I think there's a kind of lack of class analysis in the Green Party structurally, and I think that's why a lot of people still want something more than the British Green Party, and that's why there's still this kind of hunger for a democratic socialist party, and that's why despite the fact that, I mean, your party has looked like the whole thing is just going to collapse, but time and time again. But I mean, it'll be interesting to see what comes out of this weekend. Basically, it will be. Let's put it that way. It will be interesting.
Yeah, what you say to me is like, it seems there's a conflict. How much that they haven't decided, how much they follow with the system and how much they'll be against the system, or they'll pretend to be against the system. The problem, we need someone braver than Jeremy Corbyn and someone more knowledgeable than Zara Sultana, but they seem to be really calling the shots, not really, right? They seem to be adding to the confusion. It's a pity. But as you say, I think in Britain, it's very difficult to genuinely oppose the empire. Everything is made for you to be intimidated and shut down, more than any other country I have stepped in. Well, not that I know that many countries, but this is the appeal to comply, the appeal not to develop a consciousness is in Britain very strong. People get punished. I mean, you've been brutally punished. I have also been brutally punished. It's in our history to be brutally punished if you are in Britain and you question. Just if you make simple questions, it's not even you giving an answer. And I think I felt that Labour Party was incredibly unbrave, and so many people who are dissatisfied in the Labour Party, within the Labour Party, they I think if they failed in a way, if a mistake has been made, is not to be brave enough, be afraid, because in the end, if you're doing this, you bought the system. You are so afraid, and if you're blaming yourself, you have bought the system and you are reproducing it in a way, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why Zara Sultana, who, who's a younger MP, independent MP, who was, like Corbyn, was previously in the Labour Party until quite recently, actually. And it was only earlier this year that she quit from the Labour Party. I think that is why a lot of the support for Corbyn that was previously with Corbyn has bled to her, and why she was able to recruit so many members to your party off her own bat, against the will, as it turns out, of Jeremy Corbyn. Why she was able to get so many people over to her faction, as it were, was because she put forward this more aggressive stance of, we're not going to accept Zionism, especially. We're going to be explicitly anti-Zionist, whereas Corbyn refused to say that. He was asked to say it.
And she even talks about NATO as well.
She says we're going to be an anti-NATO party, whereas and her whole general attitude of she's saying we want it to be a working class party. We want it to her attitude to the press as well, that she's not ruling out ever talking to the mainstream media, but I think this is correct, that there should be a more combative attitude to the mainstream media rather than trying to win them over. There should be more focus on alternative media and so forth, whereas it was felt by a lot of people that Corbyn didn't have that kind of approach. Certainly that his people did not have that kind of approach, and so she was putting forward all these kind of more aggressive strategies to the mainstream media, and in generally more aggressive, as you said, anti-NATO, anti-Zionist and so forth, whereas Corbyn often had the appearance within the British context of being radical, but actually when you look at his actual policies and what he would say, he would often be quite wishy-washy in his answers. I think that's probably fair to say. It's not derogatory, but whereas Sultana can be a lot more direct, for good or ill. And so that's why a lot of the kind of supporters bled to her, and what started off this whole your party thing was announced by her in the first place as the co-leading of a foundation of a new socialist party with her and him together. And it's now we're seeing all these different internal disputes, and it's now what is going to be decided at this conference is, it seems like there's not going to be a co-leadership. The options that are going to be discussed, and I've seen the agenda of the conference this weekend, it has only come out very last minute. Even the activists most of the activists don't even know what's going to be discussed at the conference, but it seems like what's going to be voted on has come out in the last few days, is that the options that are going to be decided are between either having one leader or having a collective leadership model. So exactly how that is going to work, I think a lot of things are still up in the air, it seems. And Sultana in the last few days has come out and said that she's in favour of a collective leadership model rather than the MPs. And the interesting that, and then we have, which you mentioned as well, this issue of the independent group of MPs. This is interesting because it speaks to what was a big problem within, or certainly a very debated issue within the Labour Party during the Corbyn years, which was that a lot of the grassroots activists that I spoke to wanted to have democratic selection of the candidates for MPs within the party, so that the mass movement, the party members in Labour as it was at the time, would vote in their local, branches and constituency parties and decide who their candidates were. And that way they could ultimately hold MPs to account. And they wanted to do that quite often. They wanted to, especially when there was MPs, as there were in the Corbyn era, who went openly and aggressively against the leader, and by extension against the membership, what the membership wanted in terms of, especially at the time, the anti-Semitism hoax, to stop perpetuating that, to stop saying that there was, this anti-Semitism problem and so forth. They wanted to remove their pro-Israel candidates and replace them, with socialist candidates who would be critical of the war crimes that Israel was carrying out and so forth. And what a lot of members wanted was to have open selection, that the members would vote for their local candidate for MP. And so, I think that is going to be a demand within the membership, that there should be socialist candidates that are backed by the socialist members who are going to be going forward to be the candidates for parliament, rather than sort of an account. Without taking a side in the eternal disputes about the independent group MPs, that they are independent candidates who won at a local level in last year's general election, and they weren't backed by any party slate, right? They won on the issue of Gaza, because obviously, summer of last year, when the general election in Britain took place, was the height of the genocide in Gaza, and it became a massive issue within the election, where the Labour Party, the opposition at the time, which ultimately became the government, it didn't really win the election, right? It was more the Conservatives who lost. And although they won because of Britain's really undemocratic first past the post electoral system, they actually lost a lot of seats. They lost the Green Party won, I believe, 2 more MPs. They certainly had a great amount of success. So the Labour government, Labour won by actually its number of votes really dropped historically, ironically, but it was only because the Conservative government's vote collapsed, because they had opposition on their right from the Reform Party, Nigel Farage's right-wing party, which is actually leading a lot of polls now and looks likely to win the next election. So what we're seeing is like a general realignment of politics within the UK, which is kind of similar to what happened in Greece in a lot of ways, with the collapse of the traditional Social Democratic Party, the hollowing out of it because of its kind of implementation of neoliberalism, and a realignment of new political forces. So there's going to be a struggle, and your party, it could be something completely new, could be a complete disaster, it could be another Syriza, which wouldn't be very good. But I think the future is unwritten, but it will be interesting to see.
Yeah, like you're saying, we have 2 days. Tomorrow we'll sort of get indications of where they're going to go. And I personally am just going to say I don't live on a hope and a prayer, so I won't be holding my breath. But other people, you're free to hold your breath. Okay, so
I will say one hopeful sign is that unlike the Labour Party, which one of the Labour Party conference, one of the biggest receptions there is the Labour Friends of Israel, which is essentially a front group for the Israeli embassy, LFI. At your party conference, it looks like the only LFI that's going to be there is La France Insoumise, which which is obviously kind of the French, led by the French Jeremy Corbyn in a lot of ways. Whenever I see I've got a French journalist friend of mine. Whenever he says LFI, he means Le Front Insoumise, and I get confused because I'm always thinking LFI, Labour Friends of Israel. But
so a step better, a step up from absolute hell. So that is
yeah. So that's the good news.
So that we can like end on that hopeful note with you, Asa. Thank you so much for joining us on Empire Watch Weekly.
Thanks for having me.
Bye. Yes. And we'll let you go. And we will continue because we have one more story to go. Even though we were trying to get to 2 hours, we did not succeed. But we're gonna go through it really quickly, aren't we? But anyway, thank you, Asa.
Thank you so much, Asa. Yeah. Thank you for being
here.
here.
Everything. We'll put the links down below. So
great.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. Now I'm just gonna remove Asa from the stage. Okay, cool.
So, Ileana, I'm having all kinds of trouble here with my devices. I don't know, just apologize for that.
There's been so much confusion with coming back and forth, but I think we managed to cover it very well. No, we did not, but it's okay. We're on our last news item, which is again an update on the Japan situation, but this time there is a new development that is actually a historic first, which is that Xi Jinping actually initiated a call with Trump. So this has actually never happened before. And if we look at but first, let me give you some pretext, some context. So for the past 2 weeks, or has it been 3 weeks, we've been following the Japan story where Takaichi, the Prime Minister of Japan, made a very, very provocative statement about Taiwan, playing on basically the US propaganda about China invading Taiwan, which, like I said before, we've said many times, Taiwan is considered part of China. It's an internal matter. But the Takaichi said if China invades Taiwan, then that will be considered a self-defense for Japan to react. Now, this is very, very provocative, as we've talked about, for 2-3 weeks because of the historical context of Japan being a fascist power during prior to World War II and ending in World War II, resulting in 30 million deaths in China. So this is a very serious historical context. 30 million deaths, estimated 30 million deaths. And that includes a genocide in Nanjing. So it's a very serious thing for Japan to be saying this. And since then, China has been saying to Japan, just retract your statement, back down, because even Japan has acknowledged that Taiwan is part of China. It is the diplomatic understanding around the world. The majority of countries accept that to be the case, that it is a diplomatic issue, but an internal issue in Taiwan and in China, between Taiwan and mainland China. So they've accepted it. For her to say this is contradicting the diplomatic stance from Japan to China. And so they're saying to her, retract your statements. And they've done all these sanctions but all these reprisals, as we've talked about last week. But in response, Japan has actually announced that they will deploy missiles on Yonaguni, which is part of the islands of Okinawa, which is a Japanese colonized island, and is the closest Japanese territory to Taiwan. So this is only 110 kilometers, I think, if we just bring it up. It's 110 kilometers from Taiwan. So that's like an incredible provocation and an escalation. And in response, I don't know why this is not working. In response, oh, sorry, that is not it. Share this tab instead. Here you go. In response, of course, China has again reiterated calls, public calls like speeches to Japan to retract. However, they did not actually call for a meeting with Japan. Instead, Xi called Trump to initiate a meeting, like I said, a phone call, and the first of its kind. And this is significant in several ways. I mean, there's if we look at Arnaud Bertrand here, his analysis on this, he's sort of suggesting that this call and this sort of portrayal of events and context about Taiwan is not just in response to Japan. There's a historical context to it. Xi Jinping is, this year we have seen in many, many different speeches this idea of the adherence to a multilateral world, the adherence to international law. And basically, one of the things that they said in this meeting is, we should look this up, but before we open this up, essentially for China to go to the US instead of Japan regarding this matter indicates several things. Like, for one, I think it indicates that they know that Japan is a vassal state of the US. Okay, that's like one thing, right? Like, that kind of suggests that, right? And then, of course, right after this call, Trump calls Takaichi, the Prime Minister of Japan. So we know that there is direct correlations and links, and I think China's just just openly acknowledging the dynamic here. But
exactly, and it's very uncommon for China to explicitly send messages, right?
I mean, they have gotten a lot more assertive this year. I think because what they're really doing is laying the foundation for what they believe to be the way forward. The multilateral world that China is envisioning, they're kind of laying it out for the whole world to see and to understand their vision for what that would mean. So it makes sense here that when they release this, and this is from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, this official website, China's official foreign affairs website, they highlight it's quite different what they highlight versus Trump, but here they say this part: President Xi outlined China's principled position on the Taiwan question. So this is regarding Japan, what Japan has just remarked, right? And he underscored that Taiwan's return to China is an integral part of the post-war international order. Now, this is a significant sentence. China and the US fought shoulder to shoulder against fascism and militarism. Given what is going on, it is even more important for us to jointly safeguard the victory of World War II. This is a direct reference to the fact that Japan was one of the fascist powers in World War II. The US and China were on the same side. This is what they're saying. And it's significant because it allows, first of all, as part of this multilateral world that China's envisioning, it allows an off-ramp for the US to be like, you are part of the world. You are one country in the world. And we can, as on the side against fascism, we can work together side by side. So it's kind of a very different framing from the adversarial framing that we get from the US, right, against China.
Absolutely.
And I think it's interesting that, Trump, and actually this is also shown here, Trump, he is more likely to, he doesn't mention that part. Well, because also it's in his Truth Social. It's like, so it's a bit more loose. But essentially he talks about discuss many topics, including Ukraine, Russia, fentanyl, soybeans, and other farm products. Essentially, he's talking about the successful meeting in South Korea, which, remember, a few weeks ago was about the trade agreements, about postponing the export regulations on rare earth minerals, etc. So again, it's this very economic focused way of doing diplomacy. Like, it's imperialism, it's capitalism. This is what Trump is emphasizing. But I think it's a very significant meeting and a response. But at least Arnaud Bertrand is suggesting it's a response to what Japan has done, but not the only reason that it's being presented to the US this way. That is more thought out and more of a wider strategy for what a multilateral world means, essentially. So it's an interesting
leading by example, so to say, right? Leading by example, and also showing Japan that Japan is not that big. It's not that powerful. They should respect boundaries. I think there's a message for Japan that too. But it's impressive that nobody in the media is talking about that, Ileana. I mean, such an important piece of geopolitics, and nobody's talking about it.
I mean, the way that they're framing it is more like, oh, so Xi talks to Trump, and then Trump immediately tells Japan to stand down. And of course, Japan is coming back saying, no, that's not what Trump said. Trump said, you can call me anytime. That's kind of what they're sort of like asserting their importance again, geopolitical Japan, and trying to assert their sovereignty, when I think this kind of indicates a lack of sovereignty. The deeper meaning behind it that you're saying, exactly pointing out that the mainstream media is not covering, is kind of this thing of what is a multilateral world, essentially, that Xi is pushing, and how can the US enter into
of this understanding of the very media, which does not even try to understand. Ileana, I think we've covered everything, haven't we?
We have. We did it. And you know what? We're at 2 hours and 15 minutes. So that's not as long as usual, but yes, thank you so much, everyone, for watching with us. And we will see you next week with a very special guest called Zah. So we'll be talking more about China-related topics. So I'm very excited about that. And
I'm very excited too.
Good. Enjoy your rest of your trip.
I'll see you next week then.
Okay,
thank you, Ileana. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.